I'm going to call this town meeting to order. The first order of business is to elect a moderator. Are there any nominations?
I nominate Jim Tripp.
Second, okay. I move that the nominations be closed. Would you move?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Jim?
All right, I'm going to read the call of the meeting for the notice. It is legal notice of special town meeting, Board of Selectmen, Wednesday, January 16th, 2019, at 6:30 p.m. in the Mary Flood Room, 20 Freestone Avenue, Portland, Connecticut. Pursuant to Section 503F of the Town of Portland Charter, a special town meeting will be held by the Board of Selectmen on Wednesday, January 16th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. in the Portland Public Library to consider and act upon the lease agreement between the Town of Portland and the North Middlesex County YMCA for the use of land owned by the YMCA for recreational purposes. Resolved that the town is in favor of renewing the agreement for a period of 5 years effective March 1, 2019 and expiring February 29, 2024 for the purpose of conducting recreational activities, including but not limited to soccer activities. There shall be no charge to the town for the use of the land. Dated in Portland, Connecticut, this 27th day of December 2018. Attested Susan S. Bransfield, First Selectwoman. All right, I would ask the clerk that you include a call of the meetings, which is posted here in the minutes, as well as the return of notice. And you keep those with the minutes from this meeting. Is there a motion to introduce the resolution?
I have a motion.
Is there a second?
All right, I will read the resolution. All right, again, special town meeting resolution, Town of Portland, Connecticut, January 16, 2019, lease agreement between the Town of Portland and the Northern Middlesex County YMCA. Whereas the current lease agreement between the Town of Portland and Northern Middlesex County YMCA for the use of land owned by the YMCA for recreational purpose expires. I'm just going to put expires. February 28, 2019. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town is in favor of renewing the agreement for a period of 3 years effective March 1, 2019. Should be 5, right? Right. All right, so I just... And expire, all right, so again, just to recap that, resolved that the town is in favor of renewing the agreement for a period of 5 years, effective March 1, 2019, and expiring February 29, 2024, for the purpose of conducting recreational activities, including but not limited to soccer activities. There shall be no charge to the Town of Portland for the use of the land. Be it further resolved that the First Selectwoman, Susan S. Bransfield, be and hereby is authorized to act on behalf of the Town of Portland to sign said lease agreement. All right, do we have any discussion?
So the only comment I would make is that certainly, obviously, we made it for 5 years. The intent is not to use it for 5 years. The intent is to get out of it once the new fields are ready, because ultimately we don't want to be maintaining, it's not in this cycle of just doing maintenance on it well. So we made it for that. We really know that, our intent is to not go the full length. Hopefully everything goes as scheduled and clearly we can go out for future.
Ralph, is there a pull-out clause?
Yes.
Yep.
60 days. to July.
Okay.
And they to us.
Oh.
And I will also say that Michelle Volnick, the president of the YMCA, she signed the agreement, she's in favor of it. So preliminarily, she's in favor of it, so depending on the vote tonight, hopefully we'll be able to sign it and we'll have it reserved. I also just want to make for the record our expression of gratitude to the YMCA for their cooperation with the Town of Portland for so many years and the provision of the land. It's a wonderful arrangement that we have with the YMCA, and we really treasure the special relationship we have with them.
Okay. Any more discussion? All right, I'd ask for a motion to move the question. Can I have a second? Seconded. All right, we're going to vote.
All right, so, come on up, everyone gets a slip of paper. It's a yes or no question. There's some writing utensils over here. And that's it. So, here, I'll sit you guys. I'm sorry. You guys, pens, pencils, right up here.
Does it go back in the bunny box? What are the votes?
You can put it in the lid of the bunny box.
So, yeah, I'll go over that again. If you're in favor of the motion, it's a yes, and if you're not in favor of the motion, it's a no. Just in case. Let's get theirs. There's the votes. You in here?
I did.
You did. I didn't get mine. Alright. Oh, this one, I counted them. Make sure.
All right. Do you want that?
Yeah, please.
I changed it and initialed it.
Thanks. Is it the first one? It's fine. Legal notice.
Email, one of your emails last week,
I think I just said 5 years.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Cross-country skis.
All right.
I don't know if we got snow.
I'm gonna be away.
My guess is,
Yeah.
sweet clean sweeps.
I have all yeses.
I have all yeses. So how many people voted?
We have, should have 16.
You want to count them?
Yeah.
Make sure we got them.
3, 4, 5, 6. You should have 10.
That's a lot. After the section, up into the wet spot. So it's all done until.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perfect.
That's
All right.
great.
All right, so we got, you want to announce it? You want me to?
You can, you're the moderator.
All right. Motion passes 15-0, so it's good.
Move to adjourn.
16 to nothing. Second.
16-0?
16
16-0, sorry.
voted.
Motion made by,
I'll second.
seconded by Lou, and, all right, all in favor? All
Right.
right,
Time of
We're
6:41. All right.
all done?
3, 5, yep. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15,
I don't
16.
know.
16.
Yeah, you always let 'em know.
Yeah, that worked out good.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Tell
So
us like we've done this before.
yeah, you're
It's 7? Oh, we have the
16.
waste thing.
16 voted.
The public hearing to order, and I'll read the legal notice of the public hearing for the Board of Selectmen, date Wednesday, January 16, 2019, at 7 PM in the Portland Public Library, the Mary Flood Room, 20 Freestone Avenue, Portland, Connecticut, 06480, pursuant to Sections 406 and 503, letter I of the Town Charter. The Portland Board of Selectmen shall hold a public hearing on Wednesday, January 16, 2019, at 7 PM in the Public Library, Mary Flood Room, to obtain public comments and questions, both orally and in writing, on the proposed town ordinance entitled Fats, Oil, and Grease, that are known as FOG Management. A copy of the proposed ordinance is available for public inspection on file in the town clerk's office located on the ground floor in the Portland Town Hall at 33 East Main Street and online at www.portlandct.org. This was dated the 27th day of December, 2018. Attest Susan Bransfield for Selectwoman. I also have copies of the proposed ordinance tonight. If anyone needs one, please come forward. I do have also our Director of Public Works, as well as the oversight of the Sewer Division, as well as Water Division, Mr. Bob Shea, in the front here. So I'll first ask you, Bob, if you had any comments as to why you had asked that we have this ordinance in place, or if you make any comments.
Nothing's changed, it's just a statute and a requirement that's been existing in the state of Connecticut through the Department of Public Health. for some time, and it's a way to control what's going into our system that we have to maintain in the establishments that are certified as class 3 or 4 food establishments only. So I think we've identified 15. We notified them last week of this in writing to make sure they had an opportunity to be here if they would like, because it really just affects them.
Someone had asked me what class 3 and 4 is. Do you?
Depends on the size of your establishment. There's a few factors that go into that, and it determines what type of cooking you're doing as well.
Okay.
There's about 15 of those facilities in town that have been identified that would have to apply and then be inspected.
Open up for comment. Margaret, did you have some comments?
Margaret Cohen. I just wanted to say,
Red Berry Lane.
Red Berry Lane.
Yes.
Sorry. Many of you have seen the news. I mean, I'm surprised that this hasn't come up before, because if you look at the news, was it West Hartford 2 years ago?
Mhm.
There was one recently in actually a fairly small seaside town in Great Britain that had their sewer completely clogged up with fat and grease, but also with wipes. And so my only question is there a way to encourage homeowners as well to watch what they put?
Through education, and we try to do that on our
Yeah.
website, but I think we can add more to that, sure.
Yeah, because I mean, that was their.
You mean baby wipes or
Yeah.
hand wipes?
Hand
Think-
wipes,
Yeah.
they're just non-absorbable.
Right. They don't disintegrate.
So, yeah, I mean, that was my thing. I basically came to just make sure.
Are you in
people weren't
favor?
Complaining about it.
So you're in favor of adoption?
Very much in favor, again, I think.
Appreciate that.
It's been,
No. Any comments? Any comments? We'll wait a few minutes. I usually wait at least 5 minutes or more in case someone comes.
Bob, I'll
It's-
ask
it's
you
like-
something, just while we're waiting. How has this changed from what we previously had on the books?
Oh, there is-
Because I remember as a,
There is one change,
Yeah.
and it was recommended, the conversation was brought up by Ben related to the maximum, or the minimum requirement on that, so that would be page 4. Source of sanitary sewer outflow used to be a minimum of $1,000. We made that a maximum of $1,000, and that cost would be determined, DBD, would be determined by what type of blockage, what type of effort that the town would have to make, and what costs it would incur. So I thought that that was a good suggestion by Ben to change that, to give us some flexibility there as well, and not penalize what's not necessary.
I think what, Rick, did you mean there was some other policy in place years ago? Is that what you meant by that?
yeah, I was just wondering what we had for policy before this.
I do believe we had, I wish someone from chat about, there was guidelines or something, but there was never a, this is what you have to do.
I mean, I remember.
There was no
yeah.
application, there was no really inspection procedure per se by the town, who the chief operator would be handling this, which we would do. And this is kind of the programs that were established years ago, and this came to us from our health district related to a business that changed hands in town and how we were gonna handle it. So this is why I developed this, because we didn't have an existing 5 program. And the old guidelines, or the way they used to do things, has transitioned to this.
Okay, because we used to be inspected by the
Chatham
it used to be,
Health.
yeah, Chatham Health.
And they would make,
Before that, it was.
they would make recommendations for like grease traps and all. I think that's where you're going with it.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and, but I think what I'm hearing is if push came to shove, we didn't really have any teeth. Because we didn't have an
Oh, okay.
ordinance.
Right.
So now we,
That's kind of what I got out of it.
And in its own little way, it's been pushed out of the town.
but now we're bringing it back in, right? You're gonna enforce this, or I mean, the
Yeah.
town's gonna enforce
Yeah,
this.
so that's why that fee structure is there. We'll use our chief operator of our sewer plant to go out and do that annual inspection each year. And that way, because he runs the system, so he knows what's happening, especially in areas of concern, and he'll make sure that they're doing the things that are listed in this program, and he just checks and signs them off. So the annual application for that is to make sure that they haven't changed hands, and it pays the $50 for his labor to go out and do that once a year.
Now, is that gonna be in addition to when you apply for your renewal of your food license? You know,
This is totally separate.
totally, so, okay.
That's why I suggested, and I'm sure other people did, notifying the people that were gonna be affected to see if they wanted to be
We
here.
were able to
Yeah.
do that. We got a good list last week in December.
You didn't hear from?
No.
It's pretty common in other towns and communities.
It's extremely common.
Oh, yeah.
As Margaret pointed out.
Kind of on the back edge of it.
Yeah.
Which, when I was doing the research, I noticed all I had to put was fog up, and I got a town in the city and state.
A lot of towns require like external grease traps, and you end up digging up the parking lot to
Yeah.
hook into the sewer line with this external grease trap and set up.
I have
Yes,
one
Margaret?
question. Where does where do the restaurants or the parties involved in this, but where do they actually dispose of the?
They have to
material?
contract that?
Hmm?
They have to contract that out.
Oh,
Someone that
okay,
does
so
that.
each.
You used to be able
quarter-
to sell it. not anymore.
Yeah. But each quarter then they have to clean it.
Yeah, and that's,
Yeah.
Yep.
and that's a requirement in the program that they show proof that they're managing it,
Mhm.
as well as
Oh, okay.
disposing of the property. There's a lot of little checks and balances.
Any other questions or comments tonight on this topic?
No.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing at 7:10. And later on, at our regularly scheduled meeting, the selectmen will look at adopting this ordinance. It's on our agenda.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good program.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.
One of our citizens that used to attend a lot of our meetings, Shirley Olson, passed away since the last time this board has met. So I would ask for you all to have a moment of respect and silence for our beloved Shirley Olson. There will be a mass for Miss Olson at St. Mary's Church on Wednesday, the 23rd of January at 9 o'clock in the morning. Anyone who would like to attend. That's Wednesday, January 23 at 9 o'clock, Freestone Avenue is where St. Mary's Church is. Thank you. And with that, if you'd all have a seat. Next item is approval of minutes from January 2nd, 2019. Is there a motion to
I'd make that motion.
approve? Motion made by Mike.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Lou. Any changes or errors, omissions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Under acceptance of agenda, I have one item that, excuse me, under executive session, I wanted to add negotiations to the pending litigation. So there'll be two topics on executive session. And with that, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda as
So moved.
amended. Made by Jim, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lou, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion carries. The next item, under communications and correspondence, I wanted to let you know that on Friday, a couple members of the board and myself will be attending a meeting in Hartford, and it will be with Commissioner Paul Pino, who is the doctor and director and commissioner of the Department of Public Health in Hartford. And I had asked for a meeting with Commissioner Pino, and it's to let you know that I contacted him on behalf of the Board of Selectmen in hopes that his office would be able to assist the town of Portland with possible grant funding or loan funding to explore a study of our municipal water system along the Route 66 corridor to East Hampton. As a non-member customer of the Metropolitan District Commission, we've been asked to allow MDC to utilize portions of our system to expand their services to provide water to our neighboring town, East Hampton, a community which does have significant water quality and quantity issues. Metropolitan District Commission raises several concerns related to our Portland's current system's capacity, raises a concern regarding the need for ongoing maintenance, as well as the potential fee structure and billing, as well as the impact to our customers here in Portland. We certainly have a responsibility to ensure that this decision is made with the best interests of our citizens in mind, despite the immediate need of a neighboring community. We believe that an in-depth study would accomplish this goal. In addition, Portland's Economic Development Office is working with a commercial development along the Route 66 corridor, but the scale is limited due to the lack of municipal services. Further development of the corridor to expand Portland's tax base would require expansion of both the water and the sewer capacity. The recently completed Route 66 corridor study, which is still ongoing, but there's been some work completed, has cited the need for water infrastructure to bolster economic growth and to address ongoing issues with potable water in neighborhoods scattered along the corridor. As there are multiple parties and agencies affected, perhaps the first step in embarking on this project would be to arrange a meeting with your office, the Department of Public Health, Metropolitan District Commission, the Town of East Hampton, Department of Environment and Energy and Environmental Protection, and the Town of Portland, at which point we could decide on a path of action in determining the benefits and roadblocks we could encounter. So the reason for this letter was to get some attention to the need to look at not just the immediate needs that may be presented, but also the future needs. And I think that the expansion and the appropriate development of water and sewer along the Route 66 corridor could benefit eastern Connecticut. This isn't something that would affect just East Hampton. It could potentially affect not only our town and East Hampton, but also Marlborough and Hebron, who also have some difficulties with water quality and quantity. So the commissioner did arrange a meeting, and many parties will be there on Friday, including 3 of us, and we will report back once we have the meeting and know where we're headed. But there had been some publicity on this, and I wanted to be certain that people were aware of the letter, so I'll just pass the letter forward. And certainly if you want a copy, I'll make it available. I may have sent it in an email, I'm not sure. Furthermore, we got a letter late this afternoon, and it was provided from it was provided by Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. And they had pointed out that our governor has asked cities and towns to contemplate delaying the deadline for paying taxes to those individuals that are affected by the federal shutdown, the federal offices. There are people in certain jobs that are not receiving unemployment benefits. They do not receive unemployment benefits, and they are receiving no money. So until such time as the federal shutdown and the budget for the federal employees are considered, we're being asked to think about this, and I wanted to bring it to the attention of the selectmen. There would need to be some action by the legislature in order to accomplish this. So the purpose for bringing it up is to know what your feelings are, whether you would agree to delay the deadline so that while they still will owe the taxes, the penalties would be waived if the legislature and the governor sign off on it. So I'll open it up for just a little discussion at this point.
How would that work in the scenario with the escrowed money in the mortgages?
I didn't quite get that last sentence, I'm sorry.
How would that work with the money that's been escrowed in their mortgages for the
I
taxpayers?
don't have an
How would-
answer
How
for
would
that.
we figure that out? Or should we do it more on the tail end, that we would waive the fees?
If they're late.
Correct.
If they're
Yeah.
If there was,
late.
because then,
Sure.
then we're not getting involved. in
Yeah.
Whether it's already been collected and they're already paying it, we don't, that could be it.
And many people have paid already, because I talked to a family that is affected, and they said, well, we've already paid our taxes,
so that doesn't affect us.
But if
So-
this goes on long,
Yeah.
maybe the next bill.
I don't know exactly, Ben, how they will fashion that law, but they'll have to amend the law associated with penalties for paying taxes late. I think they just wanted to get an idea if it's something we would agree to, waiving penalties for people, not waiving taxes. Taxes still have to be paid. But as you know, there's 18% interest on late payments. As an aside, the offices will be open, I think it's Friday the 1st, in order to make sure that people will be able to come in until 4 o'clock. That's a Friday, if I'm not mistaken. So we will be open until 4 o'clock to accommodate people to come in.
I mean, as a consensus, where I stand, I think that it would be fair to those people that live in town that the penalty was waived. That would be fair. I don't think there's a lot of people out there in the town of Portland. I know the number I've seen is like 1,500 people in Connecticut. So there may be people that work for the government that already paid, and there may be only a few that haven't. So this is not a lot of people that would be getting a penalty reduction for not paying their taxes on time. So I would be supportive of that effort that the municipalities want to move forward.
Back to Ben's comment, what if their taxes are escrowed with their mortgage payments? Then they're gonna get paid by the bank.
Correct, that's where.
This is only to allow them not to pay without, if it's late, as Ben pointed out, the penalty would be waived. That's my understanding.
And Lou phrased it that way also, the penalty portion of it. So in other words, if it was already escrowed, it's gonna be paid. Nobody needs to get in the middle of it. That's
Okay,
all
then-
set.
Then that's just flows like.
There'd be
Right.
no refunds of any.
Exactly, that would just keep continuing. But in the event that the property was either paid for, or they don't escrow their taxes, and they're unable to then pay, then what Lou said was he felt comfortable waiving the penalty.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
agree with
eventually
that.
we collect them, right. And I think that scenario is the right one.
I mean, I'm comfortable with that. There is a federal law that was already passed where I think it guarantees back pay, right? So it is something that eventually the folks impacted will be made whole, but it's obviously a big burden right now, so there's no point. I think it's a good way for us, it would be appropriate for us to give a little bit of grace for that.
And I just thought of another thing. This couldn't be open-ended. We would have to put something in there that in the event they get their jobs back
Yes.
and they don't get their back pay or which,
Yes.
that's out of our control. We need to make.
Well, and then it would be under the law that they would pass. So the legislature, the governor, would then allow the cities and towns to do this. What they wanted to get was a sense if cities and towns could tolerate such a lack of making the penalty. So that's really what they were interested in. But you're right, the actual
Collection.
recipe, yeah, the actual way that would
Because
happen.
if we sit here and say
Yes.
we're comfortable with waiving the penalty, well, then technically they would never have to pay.
Yes.
It would be.
So I just
No,
want to make
that's
sure
not the
that,
case.
no,
Yeah.
I
Good
understand
point.
that, but I think we all know how I think. I just would like to make sure we have that written
Right.
in a good way.
Yeah, I would think, the number is so small that it's a good gesture to do it.
So the consensus is okay.
Yes.
And I will share with you whatever information we get on this, so that if you wanted to have further
And if
discussion, we can.
And if you could relay that, that open-ended, and make sure that the
Yes.
law is going to be something more comfortable, it has to be clear, so,
Yes,
thank you.
thank you.
While we were talking about that,
Yes.
I was just wondering, how does the food bank work in town? Are there certain people that are eligible for the food bank? And if, let's say, these people that are federal employees are not eligible, could they become eligible for a
Temporary,
under a
sure.
temporary situation?
Yeah, the food bank, as you know, it's all volunteer, and Ruth Mayo is our director. It's an unpaid position. She puts in hours and hours of work. She gets no pay. But she and her assistants from volunteers. They screen people who come in, and so they ask them some questions and get some information about them. I don't know that they've ever denied someone, but they certainly have an idea of the need that would be presented. And needs change all the time. So while you may need it one week, hopefully the next week or the next year, you're the one contributing. So it's really open-ended, and if anyone would need to use the services of the food bank, they should certainly go down. It's Monday and Thursday from 10 a.m. to noon, or by appointment. You can call the Waverly Center and get an appointment to go in if those hours aren't convenient for you.
And on that same note, a friend of mine and Mike's, Sarah Paxton, over the weekend, did a fundraiser up in the Silent Lutheran Church, and I believe they collected at least 80 coats, a couple carloads of food, and some.
It's wonderful.
They had a bake sale and gave the money also, so it was a
That's great.
good thing.
And what church?
Xylem Lutheran.
Zion Lutheran.
Thank you, Ben. That was wonderful. Anything else under correspondence or communications from Selectmen? Okay, public comment.
Well, looking at you, right?
You always look at me.
Because you're right in front of us.
Previous to tonight's meeting, going on to number 7, we have a proposed ordinance for fats, oil, and grease, and the regulations associated with the collection thereof from food service establishments. And we had some conversation, we had some public comment, mostly positive. I don't think there were any negatives other than some questions that were raised. And I'll open it up to the selectmen for what you'd like to do.
If there's no more discussion, I think that from what we heard during that session, that the fat, oil, and grease ordinance looks like it's in order. Public notice has been given to everybody. There were people here that, did explain their concerns about it, and they were all positive. So I'd make a motion to accept it.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ben. Discussion?
No, it seems like this is common in other municipalities. We're in line with other municipalities, so it's a good thing for us to have in place.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is appointments to boards and commissions. Mike?
Nope, not till next week.
Oh, it's
We have
Mike.
Mike Hernandez.
I was given, I was told it was delayed.
Oh, no, it's not now.
It's
Now
just
we're
not-
good.
Okay, that was the last thing, right.
We're good.
So I would like to
you,
nominate Mike.
Thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you very much for your service.
Is that a second, Lou?
Yes.
Yes.
To what board?
There was some confusion last time as to whether the position you're filling, that person had resigned.
Right.
And we've confirmed that that did happen, so that's why we wait, Mike, to make sure. But thanks for coming tonight, and thanks for agreeing to serve. This is for the Route 17.
No, bring me up to date. I'm down here at the end of the line.
Go ahead, Mike. Route 17.
It's a Route 17.
Okay. Alternate or full member?
No, replacing a voting member.
Yes.
Okay. And
Thank you. for
Mike's
your-
last name?
Hernandez.
Thank you.
We thought everybody knew Mike Hernandez. Now we do.
Now we
Thank you,
do.
Mike, for volunteering. Mike is also very active in Little League. Are you a coach and an officer?
Yeah, coach, vice president.
Vice president. So we like to make sure that we have the different athletic groups represented on the committee, and so Mike will be replacing a gentleman that had served, so.
Great.
All in
Nice to
favor?
meet you.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. So all you have to do is get sworn in. Yeah, and we'll send you a letter, but you can go ahead and get sworn in ahead of time. But we will send you a confirmation letter as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item under new business is to consider an act on amendment number 7 to the agreement for engineering services by and between Town of Portland and Weston and Sampson Engineers. Ralph, I don't know if you wanted to make a comment on this. It's pretty simple, I think, so.
Yeah, just to kind of give a brief explanation. So back in the early fall, they had approached us because we were talking about some of the items that had to be covered, and one of them was that there was some addition, well, I think we hadn't really accounted for the testing services, what we were given. So Weston Sampson, being the engineer on the project, approached with the proposal that they would fill that role as doing the testing services. At the same time, what happened was there was discussion about there was also at the same time a discussion about changing the nature of the entrance. So when that came up, we weren't sure if there was going to be further amendments with regards to the contract. So at that time, I think we voted on a change order, but we kind of tabled this amendment to the contract until we had come to a final decision what we were going to do with the entrance. So at this point, we're not touching the entrance, so this really just reflects the fact that we're giving them the approval to have the contracted right to, do the testing for us on the project. Jim, is there any, that's pretty much, all right,
Yeah, that's really what it is. And some of it is working, but it's already been accomplished. It didn't hold up that being done, and this is really just kind of bringing everything into alignment now.
So the original package for this park didn't have a testing number in it?
I just can't remember off the top of my head. We've been through so many iterations of things.
No.
There was something,
But wouldn't that be part of the scope of how they are going to achieve what they bid on?
No, they didn't, no. This would be, if I understand it, Ben,
Yeah,
with
but-
Dorita's work, they will do the pay for the construction and testing services. So they'll conduct the testing, not the contractor, but the engineer will do that. And so when we signed this, we had not signed the contract with Dorita, and maybe they were waiting to make sure that the contract was signed before this was put in.
So Dorita's not doing their own testing, you're saying?
no. Weston Sampson has someone there that's been doing the testing. They brought other third parties, I think, in for some of the testing as well. That's
On
covered by this.
attachment 8.2, Ben, you'll see the scope of services. The engineer agrees to perform the following tasks. A, soils compaction testing in coordination with soils laboratory testing as required to support construction. B, asphalt compaction testing and coordination with soils laboratory testing required to support construction of the project. And C, concrete cylinder breaks in coordination with soils laboratory testing. So that's the testing that we're talking about. And then the compensation is listed there, as well as the estimate of $25,000.
So the original project didn't have that in it?
The original not the original contract, but the last iteration of the agreement with Weston and Sampson. That's my understanding.
So, could I?
Sure.
Please.
I've got the same question. So is this just we're not paying $25,000 more, we're just, Sampson is assuming, we're paying Sampson to do this rather than them paying some, walk me through, is it additional 25,000 or is it?
It's additional 25,000 that was not in the flow of the monies or funds that were going to be distributed. So the change order that we went through, I believe the change order actually just accounted for it, I think, right? I'm trying to think. Let me think. I
Was
got it
that
with
the
me.
night we talked about the change order for the entrance?
So,
Yes.
so when this went out to bid, this wasn't included. All projects need this. So the number we got didn't have this in it. I'm not trying to be a
And-
pain. I'm just trying to
my-
see.
my
Well,
understanding-
my big question is it in our budget, or is this additional?
This is
No, we've
additional.
accounted for it in the numbers that we've used in the budget analysis for the project.
So that was part of the 6
No.
million, but we just
So when I
didn't
talk-
allocate it somewhere?
I think the issue too became a matter of who could do it more effectively, right? And so that, was it gonna be done by Dorita, was it gonna be done by Weston and Sampson? And this, having it done by Weston and Sampson is more cost-effective than having it done by Dorita and having Dorita bring in a third party to do it. It just, so it began, basically, that's why it was shifted this way. So now it's being accounted for here, but when we look at the monies for contingency and everything else that we're keeping track of, this has already been factored in. So
Yeah,
we're still
and actually, I
taking
looked
that
at the
perspective.
change order. It's not in the change, though. It's already been factored in. It's not in the
Yeah.
change order. I wasn't sure. We-
Okay, because when you say change order, I'm like, start thinking that it's additional above and beyond what we budgeted for.
Yeah, but it's not in the change, it hasn't been in change order, so it's just merely to account for it in the
Yep.
contract.
And then back to my typical, can we lose the word estimate if we're saying 25,000? Can we cross that out, please? Because it says on 5.3, it says, for services performed under task 2.11, this agreement, the owner agrees to pay.
I think it should say not to exceed.
Or no more
Ben.
than.
Not to
Correct,
exceed
correct.
is.
That's,
right.
remember, we went round and
Yeah,
round last.
Yeah.
I don't want estimate anymore, and I do want not to exceed, and then.
Maybe that's what we talked about at that meeting,
No,
original meeting.
no,
we just-
originally,
we
no,
just
no,
didn't
no,
tell them.
originally it was the 93 number above it. This is a new number. That was not
Oh,
there.
you mean, oh, God, I had the
Right,
same
I still
verbiage
have
on
that,
it.
and I want that corrected, not to exceed the 93 number on this. If this is the new agreement we're signing, as long as I'm not creating, unless you know something I don't know, I don't want it to say 93.
Yeah, we just don't, you don't want to lock it in at a hard number because
Correct,
the
not to
estimate,
exceed.
it actually should be less.
Correct,
So,
not to exceed 93 and not to exceed 25, then I'm comfortable with the way it's written. Does that sound okay?
that was it.
That's fine.
No, we prefer the same, we just don't
Yeah.
want to have our number.
No,
because of that.
I agree, because maybe that, on the testing, back to that you bring up a good point. How do we confirm the true cost? If it's a not to exceed, are they giving us copies of receipts? Obviously,
get bills.
they're using a lab,
Yes.
okay.
And if it's less than that?
Then we pay less,
Right.
because Susan had a good
That's why we
idea,
don't want-
not to exceed.
Okay.
And if you look at page 2 of 3, you'll see the cost associated with the Weston and Sampson engineering portion of this project. And I think Mike had asked for this, so it shows you the various tasks. Field investigations is 2.0, 2.1 is public involvement and visioning. Preliminary design, all of that information. Final design and contract documents, permitting and funding, and so forth.
So the additional services is that $25,000 that's now being added in.
Construction testing services, 2.11.
Okay.
Right, but what's the 2.7 additional services?
That's already been there.
Okay.
Okay.
But that's additional services if they need. So in other words, that is additional services that they haven't, they were estimating that they may need $25,000 more for the project.
What is that? What is
Could
that?
be
thing?
construction and testing.
2.7.
No, I know the number.
Okay.
What does it entail?
Construction.
What is that 25 being allocated towards? Jim?
I don't.
I'm trying to remember.
So my question
It was
is-
actually.
Is that the testing numbers?
So my question is.
It was not the
Yeah.
testing numbers,
If in
Ben,
fact,
but
One at a time, please.
okay, my question is that
Lou?
if 2.7 is additional services, of dollars that are additional, could that already be taken care of? And we wouldn't have to add the $25,000?
No, that's not the
Construction
case.
testing services?
No, I know we had a conversation about, remember, the only change in this amendment is 2.11, so we would have passed through all the other sections. 2.11 is the one we're talking about here,
So when it says additional services, they're anticipating that they're gonna use that for other things.
there actually were some other items, and I can't
Yeah, I
recall
can't-
right now because I don't have it sitting in front of me.
Yeah.
But there were some other items that totaled that 25,000 that were added at that point as part of a previous amendment.
For the next meeting, could we just have a breakdown of what that is?
Okay.
I'm just curious. Would that be a big deal?
We could, no,
Yeah,
we'll just,
yeah.
I'll just tell them.
I'd like to know where that,
Sure.
what do we use?
And you said
Yeah, we
that-
had it when we approved it.
I-
That, just
Yep.
keep in mind, we had that
I'll wait
breakdown when we
until-
approved it. We just don't have it with us tonight.
Lou has another question.
So the question I have is that if in fact, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what Ralph had mentioned, is that if in fact the DeRita was going to do the testing, there's a minus $25,000 coming out of their estimated cost, and the testing is now going to be done by Sampson.
The 25,000 is accounted for in only one place, so instead of
Okay, so-
DeRita,
So DeRita wasn't going to do this?
no, that's not, they'd be testing, they're not gonna test their own work, I guess you'd say. They're, you're bringing in someone else. So that's the role.
So somewhere along the line that this testing that needs to be done wasn't figured in. Is that right?
Well, I don't think it was identified in the document. I mean, again, we're not adding 25,000 on a change order, so it has been accounted for. I
So-
don't remember.
Okay, so I'm confused about where the 25,000 is coming from. If it's not a change order, it's not additional.
Just to clarify,
Just to-
clarify. We have two contracts. We have the contract for construction. That's with Dorita. Dorita will submit, after approval and review by Weston and Sampson, changes to their work. Those are called change orders. We've approved 2. There will be 1 more coming. This board does not have to approve change orders, but I brought the change order number 2 to you in regard to the clay in the soil, because it was of a substantial nature, and I wanted you to be certain that you knew about that. The third one that's coming up has to do with additional gravel that they need. And we can have further discussion on that when it's report time from Ralph. That will require a change order in the construction. This is a change in the contract that we have, which is the other contract for engineering services. Remember, Weston and Sampson did the original preliminary design of this project, and that was paid for by a state of Connecticut grant of over $200,000. That grant gave a schematic and gave us how and what we would do on that property. Once we knew that the bond referendum passed in November of 2016, we could move ahead with construction endeavors. So we then have a contract with Weston and Sampson to get the construction documents ready, of which you're looking at here. That's why a lot of this says preliminary design, public involvement, final design, permitting. There's been a lot of permitting that they had to do with the state of Connecticut, park and rec meetings that they attend, the bidding phases, additional services, as we just talked about. There's a flood management certification that they have to obtain, as well as construction administrative services, which is the largest ticket at this point, which is $146,500 for oversight of construction. Then the resident project services, that's someone on site that provides oversight to Dorita Construction, and that's $93,000. The $25,000 is new cost associated with the contract with Weston and Sampson, but it is not a change order because the change orders are done in terms of a construction contract. So I don't want to confuse you and let you think that this is not additional money, because it's money that we have budgeted, it's available, but it will go to Weston and Sampson. So their increase in their contract in this particular phase, which was in amendment number 6 that you approved, $674,770. Now, when you add $25,000 to that, Weston and Sampson's contract will be $699,770.
Thank you.
Does that make better sense?
Yep.
So you are approving more money for Weston and Sampson, but it is accounted for within the $6 million for this project. The project is on budget.
And would it be fair to say that it's accounted from the contingency part of the budget? Okay,
That would be fair.
okay.
Also, Mike, I must say, for full disclosure, that it involves advice from the committee as far as not doing some things, or doing some things within the project scope that it won't cost as much,
Got it.
which then frees up dollars to do things that the committee determines are necessary.
And I know from talking to them also, there's been some things that you guys have modified along the way
Correct.
to save some money and make some changes with fences and.
Yeah, and when I give the update to the park, I could just reiterate what's in change order 3. Because there was a tweak to it, so I could just reiterate it.
Are you, I guess probably what's on most of our minds is, are you gonna be able to stay within the $6 million?
At this point, there's no reason to think we're not. There's nothing, we have proper amount of contingency, so. And we've done more of the more we've done the underground work where we're more likely to find issues. So everything from here on out, with some minor work in the front, well, not minor, but the entrance work, is all above ground, so.
What, I don't know if you want to wait till your report or not, but I'd be curious what's become of what decision was made about the entrance, because I remember we
Sure,
spent
if
quite a
it's
bit of
okay with the
time.
selectmen, we can do that now as part of this. So I think that's appropriate.
I'm fine with
Since-
that.
That's fine.
Since
Just
you are
where'd we end
voting
up-
on this. I
Where'd
think
we
Okay,
end up on
so-
that, and the Army
Ralph?
Corps of Engineer, and
Yep,
all
good,
that?
good point.
So, just to reiterate the discussion that was about the entrance, the discussion had to do with the fact that, again, we hit that problem with the clay. So now we are trying to look at what are we gonna do in terms of savings in order to make sure we maintain a level of contingency that we would be comfortable with. So the discussion was, okay, why don't we look at the entrance? And they were gonna have these stone walls that are part of it because of how the terrain is. So you're gonna have these stone walls as part of the entrance. Well, I said, well, okay, why don't we eliminate the stone walls so that we could reduce the cost, because the walls are expensive. Reduce it and we'll slope it. Well, when you go to sloping it, the problem is you open up and now you're impacting a greater amount of wetlands. So the cutoff is like 5,000 square feet where you get Army Corps involved. We were at like 4,999. So if we made any sort of a change, we were going over the 5,000. So after going back and forth about it, looking at other alternatives for where we could add contingency, the decision was made. There's a moderate level of risk going out to Army Corps. So why don't we just leave it be, find the savings and other items to bring in and add the contingency back that you want. And so we left the entrance as is. So there'll be the stone walls as opposed to sloping it, expanding it, and then having to worry about more complexity that would come with a further review of the piece of property, of the entrance.
And the concern was twofold, right? If it really comes into, you don't want to cause any delays, that becomes the larger risk, so this was the prudent way to go.
So then to maintain your contingency, you looked at other pieces, parts of the park?
Yes. So
This
change.
building or that field or
Yeah.
something along.
So what happened is that at that point, when we made that other change order which said, okay, solve the clay issue, we had a level of contingency, but it was greatly impaired by how much we had by taking the clay out. So this next change order has the intent of nailing down some of the things that had to go with it. So one of the things I noted was, and I have the change order here. One of the items you had was, because of the clay issue, and because of how much true gravel that because when they gave us the break on the gravel in the original value engineering change order that we did that accompanied the signing of the contract, they gave us a credit of 64,000 or something in that ballpark. And so they had only accounted for using 17% of it, plus they were gonna need a little more gravel on the front entrance. So they essentially had to say, we can't give you all the credit we were gonna give you on the gravel. And there was verbiage in the change order that specified that was part of the risk. So the first item that was critical in this change order is to say, listen, we gotta cover that gravel that we gave you credit on, we're gonna have to look at, add that back into the cost. So obviously that triggers now, okay, now we gotta look at what are we gonna do with that. So, at that point, the next two items have to do with fencing, and we're looking at ways to cut costs. So the first one has to do with there's fabric around all of the fencing, and it has to do with the holes that are in the fabric that goes around the fencing. And all he did was increase the size of the hole from 1 3/4 to 2 inches, and that saved 45 in terms. 2,545.
Oh, 2,500.
Yeah. And then the other thing was, there was a fence in the back that's above the baseball field in the back. So you have the regular fence that's a part of the outfield. Then you have the wall there's a wall there because you have to account for, again, the terrain that you're dealing with. So you have a wall, and then on top of that, you're gonna have another fence that is between the drop to the playing field and the area where cars would be parking, so you don't have any incidents where people walk off of it. So they were gonna have some fancy-looking fencing there, and so what we've done is just converted it back to a black chain-link fence, and that saved $17,220. Again, trying to look at where we can cut, and again, not necessarily having a huge impact to the average person looking at it. The next item on that change order, we had to look at the situation of, we weren't sure what was gonna happen with the rec barn. So, for the time being, until we know the final situation with rec barn, we have to account for the fact that what happens in inclement weather, we gotta have an area where you're gonna be able to let people go. So, we went through a lot of iterations looking at the buildings on the property, and the original plan had, so just to step back the original spec plan, they came back, it was a specialized type of structure called ROMTech. They came back, the builder came back with a very large number that was gonna be prohibitive in terms of our budget. So, one of the value engineered items that was determined was to say, okay, we could do it more of a regular type building structure. And so, they came back with and said, okay, here's the number for this building, it was much less, and they at that point made an add-all to add the roof in, because the roof was gonna, be $40,000, so for the time being, we left the roof out, having to see how things were gonna play out. Well, at this point, we need that roof. We gotta provide some sort of an area for anyone that's there in case some issue comes. Plus, right now, there's not a lot of trees that are gonna be on the property, so you are in a situation of, you need to provide some shade so that when people are there, that have a place to go for some, get underneath the coverage to be out of the sun. So we added that back in because that really became a critical part to add the roof back in. And they need to know now because they're getting ready to start worrying about the building. And obviously, it depends on weather. They'll get moving, but they need to know now because they have to set up structures because the roof, it's not like an add-on that you could add after the fact. It's within the entire structure, so you gotta account for it. So that was the item. So now, we then took this situation, having to look at, again, how are we gonna take out cost? And there was two more items that were identified. One was removing the warning tracks from the baseball fields. And that actually saves $23,706. We're finding that there's not a lot of warning tracks out there, and it's just an expense, and it's also a maintenance expense because it's more difficult to maintain than regular grass. You gotta take care of it, so. We had that, and the last item was to take out the scoreboard for the the back field, and that's $19,000. And in doing that, what's gonna happen is, and we've already had conversations with baseball is going to raise money to handle putting in the scoreboards. So that's accounted for. And I will note at the same time, soccer had already stepped up and said they were gonna cover the nets for the new fields, and it's like, I know this is a crazy number, but it's $18,000 for nettings. So both clubs are stepping up and doing their part to try to contribute and help out with what we can do here. And again, the items that have changed don't change the essence, don't prevent you from having games there, don't change, removed any additional features. They're really just, some are cosmetic, some of them you're not even gonna notice. So in looking at that, allows us to get the roof in, cover the gravel that they need to cover, and stay within a comfortable level that we feel with our contingency. Now, the problem not the problem, but the additional item that we had on on the original draft was the discussion was about dugouts. Because they had given us a preliminary number for dugouts because we were looking at changing the type of structure or the type of build that was done on the dugouts to try to save some additional funding. It's going to be a shorter than a 5-minute conversation, so the idea is let's hold that off for now because we're still comfortable, we got time. Let's get this change order in so they know they could move forward on these items, and the dugout will come later if we so choose so. If there's enough savings with changing the dugouts, that we'll add it to make sure that we could get, perhaps add more funding into contingency, so at the end, if it's left over, we could look at maybe adding in a couple of the things that we, at this point, we've looked at, we may have to pull out, or we're concerned about pulling out. Just hoping that we have enough contingency at the end. Obviously, you always have to make sure you're covered, so. So I think that pretty much covers, we talked about the amendment, and this is the change order that Susan's going to review with the finance director to make sure that they're, probably to double-check numbers that I know that I've shared, but to make sure that they're comfortable with what we're gonna do.
So what do you, just back to the dugouts for a second, I didn't understand that. You may eliminate, or you may
No, what the intent was
revise how
to.
they're built?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
They're extremely expensive, but, because conversations we had today, we'll have to see if there's, the alternative really saves, gotta start weighing the,
What are you
the
giving
pros
up
and
for what you
cons
get?
to whether it's worth.
Okay.
So.
I think the only other thing that, just to add, one thing is, for example, with the removal of the scoreboard, the conduit and the electrical wiring is still gonna stay in the contract.
For the,
For the scoreboard.
But-
Doing things that, for example, that.
So you can add it later.
So you can add it later without having to dig or impact something that was just constructed. So trying to be forward-thinking that way and take some of the stuff that's easily.
Thank you, that was my question.
but I would add, related to that, though, we did go back and look, and,
Once you put the field in place, you don't want
Yeah.
to dig up the field and put a wire in.
but we did look at, because I know baseball had asked me at the previous park meeting about it, and we did look at, and the front field actually does not, at this point, have the wiring for the scoreboard. Because it was removed in that original value engineer proposal. But we had conversations about it. Well, I'm sure we'll have more conversations about it before we get to that point, so.
Just to reiterate my only two things, or there was one, now I'm adding one. I just eventually do want to know exactly what that additional services for 25,000 went to cover. And then I would like confirmation that the original bid sent out on the engineering didn't encompass testing, just to make sure this is an add-on and not in the original quote. I would just think that it might have been in the original quote. But if it wasn't,
No.
it wasn't.
It was, I mean, we
did tell
talked.
finance that it was not, we knew that.
Okay, Hey, that's all.
But in terms of the definition of additional services, we'll get that.
Yes, just where the monies went. 'Cause-
Or going. I don't know that that's all been expended, Ben.
Okay.
Because this has not all been expended in
Okay.
terms of their request for reimbursement.
I'm sure they have I'm sure they know where
I'm
it's
sure
gonna
they
go
had
if it
that.
wasn't spent.
Yes.
That's what I'm just looking for, what that is.
I'd be happy to do that.
And then I'm praying the original contract said, we'll perform all testing, but I might not be getting less. Okay.
You mean from Dorita?
No. I mean, in the engineering quote of this project, I would find it hard to believe that if they took this on, they weren't responsible for the testing. That's, I would think, why we hired them. But if it was not in their contract, it was not.
Any other questions or discussion?
Okay, and I'm
Okay.
fine moving forward, Susan, and
Okay.
obviously, if you read later that it was in there, you're just not
Yeah,
gonna sign it.
right. But not to exceed, we'll replace the word estimated on line 2.10, and not to exceed will replace the item on 2.11.
Ralph, can I just ask another question or two?
Mhm.
Is most of the work done underground? All the pipes are laid, all the conduits laid? Is it all pretty
Septic,
much above?
yeah, everything, with the exception of, I would assume, there's final sewer connections that have to be done in the front,
Just
and,
connecting it up.
and the wall work you're gonna have to do. Everything else is underground, I mean, it's a killer because all the drains are there, but obviously the height's not right to collect the water.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not that high yet,
You mean the
so.
final storm?
Yeah, the final storms drains are in, yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully not sewer, because I don't
No,
know.
no.
And when's the anticipated, when do you think, if you had to guess now that, not that everyone's paying attention, but when will they cut the ribbon for this, if you had to guesstimate?
Well, I mean, we've had conversations, we talked about it briefly today. I mean, they're not gonna commit to anything, but they're ahead of this, they appear to be ahead of schedule. So we're, obviously, who would have thought we'd be sitting here this far into January with the conditions we've had? So they've been fully utilizing the weather, that's allowed them to keep working. We've talked about, it's an August, September timeframe, most likely, provided nothing weird happens with weather, I would guess. And that's what we've started talking about, so.
Great. Good, thanks.
Do they, like, if the weather gets real ugly, snowy, cold, really cold, do they shut down for a while?
I don't think they care about the cold. It's, we talked about, I mean, he was out there a few of these days in the last week that were brutal. He was joking, Nick DeRita was joking because he had them fully covered. He goes,
Okay.
well, it's the first time I took it off all day. So I don't think the cold, he goes, if we have 2 feet of snow, it gets more complicated. So
Yeah.
I think that's more the driver rather than the concern about cold. So I don't know. Let's hope Sunday
Yeah.
doesn't go the way they're starting to lean towards.
Yeah.
Sharon, there's been a bit of discussion. Was there any motion made for this amendment? Not yet, right? So we'll need a motion to approve amendment number 7 to the agreement for engineering services by and between the town of Portland, Connecticut, and Weston and Sampson Engineers Incorporated,
As amended.
As amended.
as amended.
So moved?
And I'll second it.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Just gonna write that down. Next item is letter B, refunds of excess payments.
Well, I'll
Jim?
run through them, sure. All right, I'm gonna make a motion to refund $16 and no cents to F40 Motorsports.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, make another motion to refund $16.26 to F40 Motorsports.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Make another motion to refund $16 and no cents to F40 Motorsports.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Make a motion to refund $16 and no cents to F40 Motorsports.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And one more, I'll make one more motion to refund $16 and no cents to F40 Motorsports.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
All right, I'll make a motion to refund $352.23 to Honda Lease Trust.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
And finally, I'll make a motion to refund $171.58 to Gelco Corporation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Status and committee reports? Ralph, did you have any other reports tonight?
We'll cross the park one off. We
Okay.
talked about that. The dog park committee did meet last week. They had some really good discussions. I had given them the list of sites that we previously talked about within our own park and rec. Actually, Sean and I probably could say talked about them, but gave them that list. They've already started looking at some of them. They're going to be making trips out to some of the other dog parks in the area. They got a good list, and actually, Dave Murphy, who's the chair, did not know where someone had sent him a folder with a whole lot of details about dog parks in the area. Didn't know who sent it to him, but he has it, and so he shared and made a copy for everyone on the committee. So they're moving along. They'll be meeting next Tuesday for their next meeting. That's that one. Park and Rec, what I'd say with regards to Park and Rec is they continue to work through the fields and usage permits. They're revising them, trying to get them up to speed, consolidate some of the permits they may have, make sure everything can be fit in. And looking at, from the standpoint of having, now we have the Riverfront Park, looking at the new park and how we're going to handle that. So they are working on those documents, those forms. And the only other thing, well, two things. One would be they did take a trip out to the reservoir, had some discussion about some of the things that could be done at the reservoir to beautify it or clean it up. So they were up there last week talking about it. And I guess the last thing I get out about from Park and Rec is for those who want to get through the snow that may come on Sunday, they set the Easter egg hunt date for 4/13, so just in case you want to think that far ahead. And I guess the only other thing I would Library Board is meeting tomorrow, and I know that Susan has passed that out, but prior to the regular meeting at 6:30, they're going to have, I guess you'd say, they're going to recognize the effort that Dave Richardson, who recently passed, that was on the committee, on the board, they're going to recognize him, so they're going to have a special ceremony. And the last item I would...
Do you know if you can attend? Is anyone attending? I know Ralph and I will be there, and Lou? Yep. Okay, if anyone
What
else
time?
can attend.
6:30
6:30 tomorrow night in this room. And Dave Richardson served on the library board for many years, and also a very dedicated member of our community. So, passed suddenly, so the library board wanted to recognize his service.
The last item I'll bring up is I did, along with Susan, attend the kickoff of the Town Beautification Committee. I thought it was a really, really good meeting. Kind of walked through, Susan and Mary Dickerson walked everyone down Main Street, talking about some of the spots on Main Street where there's, a real good chance, real good spots to make an impact on how it looks. So there was good discussion. They talked about, putting together some of the notes on what we had discussed. And I'm sure they'll be looking for anyone. They set their meeting to be third Tuesday of each month at 6 p.m. In the town hall. So I'm sure that once it gets rolling, they'll certainly be looking for people to help and participate. It was a good discussion.
I agree.
The only thing I'd want to bring up is we have to be careful with the reservoir, right, Susan?
Yes.
Especially with things like any beautification and all that, because I don't think we're supposed to use it for any recreational purposes,
Well,
or we might lose our status to be able
Right.
to reuse it as a reservoir in the future, which we would not want to lose that. So make sure everybody's fully aware that.
That's not the kind of things they're talking about.
They
They're
did
talking
get
about fencing around it that's
fishing.
falling down,
But
and,
I think they got permission to fish there.
yes, they
As
did.
long as it doesn't affect.
From
and-
DPH.
And it needs to go
Good point,
through.
because that may become a water source for us. As a
Right.
reminder, we have 8 years left on the MDC contract. And depending on how things proceed, that's why I spent some time earlier, talking to you about this whole idea of the water and provision of it and the possible expansion of it. The water from MDC comes from Park Hampstead. It's cleaned there, and then it comes through Hartford, and then it comes down Glastonbury into Portland, and the discussions that East Hampton has had takes that water and more of it, potentially, out to East Hampton. So lots more. And there's some environmental concerns with that, and there's certainly some concerns as far as, just mention this one thing. If the water were to go through Portland, you have an interruption or a break along that way, then it's got to be fixed, or else they don't get water. So there's a lot of things to think about, not the least of which, from the calculations, if we were to become a non-member town rather than a customer, the payment is much higher to MDC than what you have now. And MDC recently, their fees were raised, right, Jim? How much were they?
That's one of the things we're contending with, is that in last January, they went up 13%, and then what we heard is in December, they basically passed an 11%. So at least internally, that's what they're going up.
They don't go through Pura. go through their board, and we would have no representation on their board. So these are considerations that I think are very important for our board, that is the Water Authority and the Sewer Authority. And to Ben's point, I think this board should look very, very seriously about sources of water that we already have, and how we could utilize local sources to provide water, as opposed to $600,000 plus that goes to MDC to supply us with water. And then on top of that, another amount of water that we don't pay nearly as much for comes out of our well. So water is going to be very, very, very important. I think it gets more important as time goes on. But I think this deserves an awful lot of attention.
So what I will say, Ben, is that I am on the Water and Sewer Subcommittee, so I'm very well aware, because we have already talked at length at times about the reservoir and where its future
very
is,
good
so.
No, I didn't doubt that,
I
I didn't doubt that
understand.
you
I
knew,
understand what you're saying.
But you have to be very careful when other people get these grand DOC ideas about what to do with the reservoir. It needs to be quickly mentioned.
No, the discussions
what
are
type of asset
about.
that is for the residents.
Is
Absolutely.
It is an asset.
aesthetically what it, there's writing on the building there, the fence, there's overgrowth along the bank. So those are the type of things we're talking about.
I think what Ben's referring to also is that previous boards, way before us, looked at that becoming a recreational park.
Yes.
So that is not the direction we are taking,
And-
absolutely not.
And back to Susan's point, and I think Dave Kuvlinski in the back of the room, they're now making mobile treatment things that can then be parked and utilize the reservoir. So as times change, that is an asset we do not want to lose. That has a major, major, major value, so I don't want to jeopardize it.
There's also other infrastructure that when this was evaluated, we're basically 22 years into a 30-year contract. At the time that was made, part of it, there was certain infrastructure like the tank farm and stuff that's up there now that weren't necessarily in place, that's there now, so it does make reopening that up more possible. And it is something that we have to look at. It's something with the Water and Sewer Subcommittee we're looking at. We're actually going to be starting up our meetings again for that and for sidewalks, but particularly on this issue. Because we look at it's a way with everything else that's going on to be a hedge against some of the costs that we're seeing going up in MDC. You have the investment cost of having to do some sort of a treatment facility, but it also then allows us to basically produce our own water, so.
Susan, could we look into, Jim brings up a good point, into grants for potentially a treatment, whether it be a mobile one that, they're very, they've come a long way from what I
Right,
hear.
I agree.
So if there is the potential to do that, I think eventually, well, I've said this for years, I'd love to see us get off that, and I think it sounds like, Susan, you're in the same
Yes.
boat, and Jim. So those are the things we need to look at now, because obviously the 8 years, we're gonna be at their mercy
Very
if we
quick.
don't, if we don't have a plan.
And it comes so quickly, Ben.
Right.
Very quickly. And that's the purpose for us, the town, asking for the state health department for this meeting. I mean, there was dialogue between East Hampton and the health department of a $40 million grant that they were asking for and a $40 million loan that they were looking for. And that's a substantial amount of money based on a study that was done for the town of East Hampton. They are in desperate need. They need water. That needs to be addressed with no question. But the impact that it would have on our town is something that we're charged with. And I know that our subcommittee, of which is Rick and Jim and Ralph, and then by extension, all of us, we're taking very seriously. And I think it behooves us to ask for grant money. And if there's a cooperative arrangement that can be made among towns, then I think you have even better application for grant money, because it means you're servicing everybody as an entity, not unlike what they did probably 100 years ago for MDC. I mean, that's how MDC got started, in terms of being able to provide water for multiple municipalities. And they do a good job of it. I mean, they provide us with very good water, and for the record, we have a very healthy, strong relationship with MDC, and they've provided us with good water. We pay for it, but it's something that we're very grateful for, and we're good partners.
And-
Going forward, things can change.
and I think one of the things we should look at when you go to this meeting is, there's also, they could just lease the right to use our pipe and continue through where we're then benefiting, and we don't change where we stand with them, and actually, I think it gives us more leverage in the future with them. So that would be one of the angles that I would be leaning towards.
And I think too, Ben, just the whole consideration, and this has been in the news, there's been a lot associated with how MDC treats its non-member towns. There was an issue in Glastonbury a couple of years ago as far as cost associated with the sewer improvements that MDC was making. And their board had voted to allow costs to be borne by the non-member municipalities. And Glastonbury had to file suit, which they prevailed on, and they do not have to pay for that because they do not benefit from the sewer. They only benefit from the water. So it's not to say anybody's right or wrong, it's just making sure everything's studied and our best interest is served by this board.
Yeah, and our subcommittee's certainly aware of the timing, because I know when we met with East Hampton, I reiterated to East Hampton officials that I know they're on a tight schedule. Well, we are too, because 8 years goes fast, and if the solution was to say a new water source, we'd shoot through the 8 years very quickly. Not to say that's what it is, but we're looking at, we realize our window's tight, so we're not dragging on this discussion.
And we'll continue the dialogue after Friday. We'll put it on our agenda and make sure we share it with the selectmen.
Thank you.
Any other status or committee reports from any other selectmen? Anything else that we need to? Okay. One other thing that I think Lou is aware of this with the airline trail, the old depot building at the space that's next to the insurance and the subway area there that the hot dog van is always next to. DOT did contact the town. We had put in a request through Christy Carpino's efforts and help to see if we could, for no cost, lease that depot. It could become a very attractive center to attract people to the airline trail, to be able to see how a depot actually looks. They have agreed to work with us. They're coming next week to talk with us about what our considerations are. So, I've invited Lou to attend.
Yeah, that's good.
Who owns, the state owns that?
Yes. And we are awaiting a final word on the traffic certificate for Brainerd Place. Their engineer, the engineer that works for the developer, Joe Balskis, predicts that he should hear by the end of the month of January. So I'll let you know as soon as I hear more on that. Any other questions on anything? Under reports? Public comment? Yes, sir.
You just mentioned something about the depot building. I'm somewhat of a railroad historian, and what's already disturbed me long ago was you knocked half of that building down.
We did not.
No, not you,
Okay.
no. But
You're right.
half of that building has already been knocked down.
You're right.
And that's already, I don't know, it's a destruction of the character of the building itself. I grew up in the town of Clinton, and there's a similar building down there on Route 1, and that's what it was used for. It's a freight depot.
Right.
I don't know if they did passenger service out of this or not. I don't believe so, because the airline,
They are, but in Clinton, they're doing passenger service, right?
yes, but that was a separate building.
Okay, yep, thank you.
The airline,
Yes,
the ghost train, as it was known, didn't stop at this station. It only
maybe
made,
not the ghost train, but Anderson Farm Supply used to get their supplies.
well, there
from
was,
that, right?
there was
Lou will know
freight,
that.
yes, but there was no passenger service out of that station. Because the ghost train only, the passenger service only made very few stops, and this wasn't one of them. You're already missing out on a major pieces of railroad history. I don't think most people realize how important that rail line was in its day. There's already major chunks of it gone, and I would myself vote to not do anything further to destroy the character of that building. It's already half gone. I don't want to see what's left of it disappear either. And that would include tearing up the tracks next to it.
We're not
Because if you
allowed.
get on there and take a picture of it, it's useless without the tracks. Another big chunk of that that's gone in this airline trail eventually, if it's completed from here all the way to Willimantic, another big chunk of that history was something called the Lyman Viaduct, which the New Haven Railroad buried, but back when they buried it, you could still see where it was. So it would be nice to be able to hike across it. I'm just speaking up to voice opposition to any further destruction to this building down here. If you don't do anything else, leave it alone, please.
Can I mention a couple?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, and the reason for that is to preserve it. The reason that we're asking to take over that responsibility of that depot, which is now only 1/3 of what it used to be. A third of it was taken away, then another third away, and now there's just a third left. So we're hoping to preserve that third. And there could be a volunteer, group of people in town that could restore it, paint it, make it look like it did years ago, and there were windows and doors, and there were a lot of other things that were there. There was a loading docks and stuff like that. So maybe some of those things can come back. So I think that the committee is looking at a restoration rather than destroying. So that's one part. The other part, the tracks that are there from Marlborough Street to the Connecticut River, that's still an active line. So they're still using part of it. But if you went from Marlborough Street halfway down toward Pickering, it's in pretty bad shape. But if we were to use that at all for a walking trail that would connect the rest of the airline trail, it would be next to the tracks. I would love to see the tracks stay there. And I think you could put a sign or some type of a explanation about these are the tracks and what they were used for the last 200 or 300 years. So there with that piece. As far as the viaduct goes in East Hampton, that's still part of the airline trail that is stone dust covered. And there are some signs that explain where the viaduct is. And you can kind of see some of the iron, because now it's kind of worn away, but some of the viaduct is still exposed. And so there's these explanation panels that will explain a little bit about the viaduct. And we've done this. Okay, no, but that part is improved in the sense that it's preserved. And as far as the airline trail in Portland goes, from Middle Haddam Road all the way to Depot Hill, we now have some kiosks that explain the history of the train, history of the bridges, the viaducts that we have. We have a trestle that goes over Middle Haddam Road. So there's a explanation panel that explains that part. So I think we're on the same page here. We're trying to see if we can preserve the history of the train, of the tracks, of the airline, as well as maybe the depot. So I thank you for that. Yeah, that's good. And maybe we'll put you on a committee.
Fine.
Good, thank you.
Anything railroad related, I have
Okay.
some knowledge of.
Good.
One of the important things that I feel is important that went away many, many years ago was a railroad station across the river in Middletown, because that's a crossroad intersection there.
Yeah.
And I've never seen that building, I've never even seen a picture of it.
Yeah.
And you can't even go over there now.
Yeah.
I can figure out by looking at it long enough where that building was. that the average person can't,
Right.
because they destroyed the area.
And that Middletown Depot was beautiful originally when it was there. And Tom Ladney, who's on our committee, has pictures of all those depots. And there's only 3 depots left from here to Willimantic that are still standing. And that's,
Well, I know there's one up, I had a girlfriend that lives in Coventry, and somewhere
Mansfield
in
Depot?
that area, there's one there that's been converted into a house.
okay.
Somebody lives in
Yep.
it.
There's one in East Hampton that's now a car rehab place. And then there's one in Putnam that's now a restaurant.
One of the famous things that the New Haven Railroad did was, when they got up to Willimantic, they tried an experiment with what they called picking up water on the line, which was they had a major long trench in between the rails with no ties across it. And when the train went through there, instead of stopping for water, it dropped a scoop into that trough, and it just scooped up water while it was moving. None of the other railroads ever tried that, and New Haven only did it in that one place.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Board of Selectmen, general informal discussion, anything further? I don't have anything updated items at this point. The Swedish Cemetery land matter will go to Planning and Zoning for an 8-24 review. And I am still waiting to hear back from the Selectmen as far as the land swap and the Exchange Club and how you want to proceed.
What
So,
does Carrie Olson say? You mention that every time it comes up.
what do you want from her?
No,
again?
you.
The
the pro-
ethical piece?
Yeah.
She doesn't have an answer for that.
Are
You'd,
we-
you'd have to put it to a town meeting.
No, I agree with that, but
Yeah.
are we in any problem by sending it to a town meeting?
I don't think you have a choice.
I agree with that statement. But I just want to make sure we're not all gonna be in hot water or something.
Okay. I did ask her, and she said, yeah, you have a vested interest. You're members of the Exchange Club. The only ones that aren't members, I think, are 3 of you. The other 4 of us are members. So,
The other question that deals with it as well is that Park and Rec is looking for a kayak canoe launch. And there's some discussion about accessing it by Tryon Street. However, that's not a possibility.
it isn't?
If it's not.
Oh, okay.
We're not sure if it is a possibility, but if it wasn't, then the other actual access would be through the exchange. Well, part of it's our road, part of it's their entrance. So we'd have to work out some type of arrangement with that. So there's a couple questions still on that.
Well, did we ever have a follow-up negotiation with them?
With
The Exchange Club?
Exchange Club. I don't think so.
No.
Because the proposal they presented, if I'm not mistaken, how do I put it? We weren't necessarily in agreement, or we debated that we may kind of push back and. keep-
Would perhaps you and Lou like to speak with the Exchange Club? I can
Yeah.
ask, Jim Hill has been our connection,
Yeah.
and he did send me an email asking a few things, so I will suggest that you meet with him.
Sure. Hang
Go
on.
through that.
I would suggest it would be the ones that are not members of the Exchange Club would be the representatives. Would that
To
make?
them. Lou?
That,
I didn't hear what he said.
Oh,
just because that would be a
No
conversation outside of this room. And they wouldn't be members of that board, they would be only members of this board, and then everything else that transpires here, I think we're good then, but what do I know?
it's up to this board. It's just,
Who are the
Whoever they want to
non-members
go.
of the Exchange Club?
I am a non-member.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I would think that's.
Long time.
I would think that's better, but whatever, don't go by me. I'm just
Probably as long as you.
So, well, what about me and I?
Not to throw you out of that, Rick,
Sure.
but I just don't,
No, that's fine. What I was bringing up is the whole issue, the ownership of the road,
Yeah.
and where they were gonna maintain their proposal, I think they maintain ownership, and we were gonna have to get a right of way, and
It's only for questions. It's not to make any decisions, Ben, if that helps you feel better.
that would be my.
But remember the
I mean,
discussion.
you're able to talk to Jim Hill. I mean, it doesn't matter, but if,
The discussion we had that same day, though, when they did come here, was the thought was, can we put, and that's why we were supposed to go out, and I, may pass this by, but can we put in a second gate to the left, and then that road is less, we could decide how the road goes either way still, but if you put an entrance and the rest, we fence it a certain way, we really could stay off of that road and not have to be bothered with the road. It all comes down to whether we want the road to be in it or out of it. It would be the discussion.
And after watching the topography, Tryon Street is the better access, which is,
it's a little higher, it's a little drier, I should say,
a
believe it or
lot,
not.
well, down there, a little is a lot.
Yeah, even though it's closer to the river.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's not underwater currently.
Yes.
And the rest is, so that, I mean.
Yep,
we can.
I know.
we can
Every
use
time
that
we
as-
get a lot of rain, I drive down there and see
Right.
where the water
And
line is.
And honestly, I didn't ever do that until this came up, and I wanted to see what would make more sense long-term than the old Tryon Street, which is, I believe, still a non-abandoned town road, would be the better access in the future. But those are two separate issues.
Right.
I think this board needs to make a decision whether the land swap makes sense for the town of Portland, and I think it does. I think there's a lot of reasons a swap should occur, and mainly, in my opinion, is the liability. And I think it cleans it up for both the town and the Exchange Club.
but the ultimate decision is a town meeting. It is not this
Correct.
board.
Correct.
So, from that perspective, anyone, including Exchange Club members, will come to that meeting and vote on it. But that is the way it works. I mean,
Yep.
it's a town meeting.
Well,
So we'll do
somebody
some-
should talk to
we'll do
them
some-
and just,
Mike and I will do some fact
Okay,
finding.
that'd be good.
yeah.
All right.
And we'll bring back the facts.
So Mike and Lou will go and speak with Exchange Club and come back with some more information first. Thank you.
And then potentially set a date, right, so you can call.
At that point, I think, yeah. Yeah.
Jim's usually in town.
Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of pending litigation
So moved?
and negotiations. So
I'll
moved.
second it.
Okay, Ben, is that okay? Seconded by Jim, all in favor?
Aye.
And we'll take a brief break.